testifying today. We should get his video of his testimony tomorrow. I think, first of all, that it's important for the sake of the survivors that we get accountability in this case. This is something they've been demanding for 2 decades now. Certainly, the more we can learn about individuals' interactions with Jeffrey Epstein and what they may have witnessed or what they may have been told by him is certainly important to the survivors. I think, however, that there's many other individuals in this particular case who are more important to getting to than former President Clinton or even our current president, Donald Trump. Both men have never been accused directly by any of the survivors that have done extensive interviews with the FBI and the SDNY. Now, of course, both spent time with him. So it is important to learn about their experiences with him. But I do think right now for the Oversight Committee and the administration, this is part of a bit of a political theater that's taking place. Certainly with Hillary, who, as we know, never met him directly. To me, it was wasted time when there's other individuals much closer to the case that we need to hear from.
And Barry Levine, what do you make of this, of the
that the DOJ doesn't hold back documents from the signed into law. The public and the survivors are entitled to see all the documents, including these FBI, what's called FBI 302 witness reports. These are interviews that were conducted. They should not be missing. There's no question about that. And I'm thankful that NPR and a couple other news organizations pointed that out. And the DOJ says that they are looking into that. So we will see, hopefully, the missing files. Now, I have to say that as someone who has investigated this case for 2 decades, as an investigative journalist and then the author of my book, The Spider, I did devote a page and a half to this woman's allegations that came in a lawsuit in 2019 following Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. I do want to see the specifics. I think, however, that the timeline doesn't appear to be correct because the allegations center on actions that she claimed took place with Jeffrey Epstein and former President Trump back in the 1980s, specifically in the 1983 to 85 range. All of my reporting shows that former President or that Donald Trump didn't interact with Jeffrey Epstein until around 1987. Both in Palm Beach, Florida, and in New York. They continued to see one another socially for the next 15 years.
But Barry Levine, isn't the issue more that all of these are allegations. We don't know what is true, but that all of the allegations against Epstein by this woman who alleges she was sexually assaulted by Epstein and also Trump, the ones on Epstein, they remain in the files. People can come to their own conclusions, but the documents around Trump were removed, and the DOJ says they're not involved in any investigation and that they released all the files. So that's the point. Why were they removed? Not whether they're true or not.
Yes, I agree. I mean, we should be able to see whether these allegations are true or not. And of course, we need to continue to do fact checking, as I have started to do on this particular case, and find issues with the timeline. We still need to see the files. And there's no question that that something is wrong here in terms of the Trump administration's DOJ. If there are, and the law specifically states that material related to men in these files, even if they're embarrassing to these individuals in terms of allegations, whether they're true or not, need to be made available to the public and to the survivors for the sake of accountability. So we do need to see each and every document. The only thing that they can hold back that they say could be privileged would be sensitive information related to national security. And we know that Jeffrey Epstein was involved with many other countries. There's allegations that he may have even been a foreign asset for Israel, for Iran, for Russia. However, we're talking about incidents that took place domestically involving this woman. So there would be no national security related to these documents. So by all means, we should see each and every sentence, no matter how embarrassing the statements are made by this woman against both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump.
And Barry Levine, based on your years of investigation of Epstein, what remains to be uncovered about his influence and his accomplices that you have not yet seen reported or gleaned from the documents so far released?
Yeah, good question. There's still 2 million files that still haven't been released. I can't believe that each and every one of those files is related to national security. Why they're holding back, why the DOJ is holding back these additional documents, this is something that's been raised by Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, the co-sponsors of the transparency bill. So we need to see everything be released. In addition to that, we learned something very disturbing recently from these files, and that is that Jeffrey Epstein hid possible evidence in 6 storage lockers around the country. He had private investigators take material out of his homes before the police raids took place. This is going back as early as the police raid in Palm Beach, Florida in 2005. Material was taken out, computers, CDs, videotapes, all different types of evidence, 29 address books. We don't know to this day if the FBI ever recovered that information in those storage lockers. And it seems to me, based on my reporting, that Jeffrey Epstein was tipped to the first police raid on his home in Palm Beach, Florida in 2005, December 2005. And he had this material removed. So we don't know what's in that material. We don't know if there's additional incriminating videotapes involving any of the 20 men that Representative Thomas Massie said were allegedly trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. Rich and powerful individuals, 6 billionaires, a political government official, someone else in politics, people in entertainment. There are men who are out there who took part in the sex trafficking that have not been brought to justice. And for the sake of closure for the victims, we need to see more by the DOJ in terms of the possible apprehension of these individuals.
I mean, very interesting that the House Oversight Committee went to Chappaqua, to the hometown of the Clintons right now, to grill them. The Republicans overwhelming there. I think there were almost 60 people who went up. But it came to Les Wexner, who may have bankrolled the pedophile criminal Jeffrey Epstein. When the House Oversight Committee went to his Ohio mansion, no Republican member of Congress, may have bankrolled him to the tune of over $1 billion, went to talk to him.
That's absolutely correct. really the money that Epstein was able to use to bankroll his sex trafficking ring for 2 decades really came from Leslie Wexner. Leslie Wexner was listed as a possible co-conspirator. He denies all wrongdoing. He says he never saw or witnessed any sexual abuse by Jeffrey Epstein with any victims. And the DOJ, the SDNY, never filed any actual charges against Leslie Wexner. But he was certainly an important individual to get to. Coming up in March, the Oversight Committee is going to depose 2 very important men in Jeffrey Epstein's life. Darren Indyke, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime lawyer, and Richard Kahn, his longtime accountant, who were with Jeffrey Epstein, worked for him for many, many years. These were men that intricately knew about Jeffrey Epstein's finances, his lifestyle, monies that were being sent out that presently Senator Ron Wyden is looking into in terms of more than $1 billion of suspicious wire transfers that took place over the years. So these men should be very enlightening in terms of what we learn from them. And as I said, I do think I think it's valid to call President Trump. He spent in 2 years, he traveled on between 16 and 27 flight legs with Jeffrey Epstein, socialized with him on these 2 trips to Africa and also Asia and Europe. As I said, he has not been accused directly by any of the victims that we have investigated. So I don't think we're going to learn any significant bombshells from his deposition today. But again, I do think that calling both of them, was really about Donald Trump going after his perceived enemies.
Barry Levine, I want to thank you for being with us, investigative journalist, author of the book, The Spider, Inside the Tangled Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.
A dog caught stealing Wellness Whimsy's dental treats, daily dental care for even the naughtiest of dogs.
Mr. Epstein, how long have you been sexually attracted to underage minor females?
Objection, harassing, argumentative. Are you kidding?
Now, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was no stranger to depositions. The accused trafficker was questioned on the record in relation to civil lawsuits that were filed against him by women who claimed they were just teenagers when they were pulled into Epstein's alleged despicable web. Well, we found one of those depositions in the Epstein Files release, and it gives you an idea of how Epstein himself, his own attorneys, and opposing counsel approached these cases. And let me tell you, it is very illuminating. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, before we go into this, here's the truth. Life insurance, I know, it's not fun to think about, but this year you have to take care of the important stuff.
To have sex with numerous friends of yours.
Are you kidding?
Reading from a lawsuit.
Oh, you're reading from a lawsuit. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Evans. I'm going to have to, though I'd like to answer that question as well, as I answered most of your other questions here today. I would like to respond. My attorneys, however, have advised me I have to assert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
Now, at points when Edwards brought up Epstein's...
You're watching BBC News. Breaking news this hour. Israel's defense minister says it's launched a preemptive attack against Iran. Israel Katz declared a special and permanent state of emergency in all areas of Iran and closed the country's airspace. An Israeli defense official says the attack has been coordinated with the US and had been planned for months. Smoke can be seen coming from buildings in Tehran, and people have reportedly been running away in panic there. Mehrabad Airport, just outside Tehran, has also come under attack. Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, is said to not be in Tehran. The U.S. Embassy in Israel, the U.S. Embassy in Israel said the attack follows weeks of tensions in the region, with the U.S. forces massing around Iran and President Trump threatening to attack unless it agrees to dismantle its nuclear program. Well, let's now speak.
Everyone you've spoken to has pretty much said that. The president has set out a very, very ambitious target of essentially unseating the regime in Iran, not just going after its nuclear capabilities or its missile capabilities, not just targeting security forces like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard or the Basij. That's the paramilitary force that were largely responsible for those thousands of deaths on the street there. President is urging people to come back out onto the streets after the bombing to try and seize control again of their country. Well, this is a regime that's been in place for almost 50 years. Two of its key slogans have long been death to America and death to Israel. That may answer some questions about why the two nations are getting involved in this, but why now? I think, as Selina said, the president's going to have to come forward with some very clear evidence as to what the threat actually is. And the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, also laying out what they saw as the threat, that Iran was trying to reconstitute its nuclear program, that it was trying to rebuild its ballistic missiles, and its support for those proxy groups in the region. These are all things that have been discussed, but where is the evidence that this was a clear and present danger right now? The policy of the Israeli government over many years has been of mowing the grass. That's the phrase that's used in the military. In other words, when the threat level gets to a certain height, you cut it down. And that's sort of what we saw last June. But this is incredibly ambitious. And for the Iranian regime, this is now an existential crisis. There's no way that they can emerge from this unscathed if they emerge from this intact at all. And that is going to feed into so much of what happens in the Middle East. It's going to start to change the shape of the Middle East. And the response from Iran has been true to its word. And I think because they feel this as an existential threat, we're seeing these short-range missile attacks against Doha, against the UAE, reports in Bahrain, the US Navy's Fifth Fleet, reports of explosions in Jordan and in Kuwait. This has all the makings of a much wider regional war that will be easier to start than stop.
Yeah, and on that point, what is a...
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London.
Who is the most corrupt member of Donald Trump's cabinet? I know. It's like I handed you a bag of M&Ms and asked you to tell me which one is the most chocolatey, right? But if one had to pick a cabinet member, excluding Donald Trump himself, who's engaged in the most outrageous self-dealing and influence peddling, the one whose personal conflicts of interest are most in need of oversight, if I had to ask you to pick one cabinet secretary, we'd have to go with this guy, the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Now, hear me out on this one, because I think a lot of what Lutnick has gotten up to in recent weeks has flown completely under the radar. For starters, there's Lutnick's role in the Trump administration's very own Bridgegate scandal. For years, the federal government's been involved in building a new bridge that runs between Canada and the United States, between Detroit and Windsor. That Detroit-Windsor crossing, by the way, is the busiest land border crossing, not just between our two countries. It's the busiest land border crossing in the entire world. More stuff goes across that land crossing than anywhere else. Trump himself was a big supporter of the project during his first term. It's called the Gordie Howe Bridge. It's named after the legendary Canadian hockey player Gordie Howe, who played for the Detroit Red Wings. Get it, a bridge between the two countries. Gordie Howe was that bridge. But the new bridge was going to compete against another bridge nearby that happened to be privately owned by a billionaire who collects toll money anytime anyone crosses it. So that billionaire owner of the existing private toll bridge held a meeting a few weeks ago with the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. And within a few hours, all of a sudden, this bridge that Donald Trump liked, Trump was suddenly threatening to block that new bridge from ever opening to the public. The New York Times asked the Commerce Department for comment on the bridge decision. They didn't respond. And in another universe, that would have been huge front page news for weeks. It's a scandal. This massive bridge between these two countries, these massive trading partners. For Lutnick, it was just Tuesday. Then there was the way Lutnick's family appears to be profiting from their bets against Trump's signature tariff policy itself. So if you know anything about Howard Lutnick, you know that when he's in front of the cameras, big smiley guy. He's been one of the biggest cheerleaders for those tariffs. He even went so far as to embarrass himself by telling a member of Congress that Americans could avoid paying tariffs on imported bananas if companies would just, quote, build them in the United States. Build a banana. Or a banana farm, I suppose is what he must have meant. But at the same time, Wired reports that in the lead up to the Supreme Court's widely anticipated ruling, which struck down those tariffs, Lutnick's family business was helping companies bet against the Trump policy. A subsidiary of the business that was run by Lutnick's two sons was reportedly buying up other companies' rights to sue for tariff refunds, so that when the Supreme Court struck down the tariffs, as it was expected to do, and as it eventually did, the Lutnick family business would make a killing. A spokesperson for the Commerce Department told Wired that Lutnick has, quote, no insight or strategic control over the firm run by his two sons, end quote. But Congressman Jamie Raskin announced just today that he is demanding an investigation into the family's business practices, and that may not be the only way that Lutnick's family firm is benefiting from his role in the administration. Politico reports that the Lutnick family business has seen its revenues increase 25% since Donald Trump took office. And that rise in fortunes has reportedly even irked Trump himself, who apparently thinks his should be the only family profiting off his presidency. Politico reports, quote, the president's been upset that Lutnick's family is profiting so aggressively off his popularity, and he confronted Lutnick directly about it during an episode at Mar-a-Lago over the winter holiday, said two people familiar with the exchange. One of the officials familiar with Trump's thinking said the president reacts viscerally when someone else profits over Trump considers his own brand, end quote. Okay, so there you go. That's the case. If you're unconvinced, everything I just mentioned is reason enough. You don't think that everything I just mentioned is reason enough to believe that Howard Lutnick should face some tough questions from Congress right now, then hold on, I got more for you. What I've got for you is what has become Howard Lutnick's single biggest liability of all. Never mind everything I just told you. He's been lying about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Back in October, Howard Lutnick was asked about the fact that he and Epstein had been neighbors in their swanky Manhattan neighborhood. And in response, Lutnick told the story of visiting Epstein's home in 2005, saying this.
This is what would happen to your body if you ate mood sleep gummies every day. Day 1, you take your first gummy at bedtime, maybe expecting disappointment. But 20 minutes later, your racing thoughts slow down.
And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. Really? So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
He's gross. Never. I will never be in the room with him socially, for business, or even philanthropy. Turns out that wasn't true. First, we got the revelation from the Epstein files that Lutnick and his family visited Jeffrey Epstein's island 7 years after Lutnick claims to have cut ties with him. Then we learned that Lutnick also appears to have had long-standing business ties to Jeffrey Epstein, which also extended well past the point that Lutnick claims to have cut ties with him. And now we've learned about this photo of somebody who looks an awful lot like Howard Lutnick with Jeffrey Epstein. And the interesting part about this photo is that it was mysteriously deleted from the Epstein files after they were initially released. It was only after people started pointing out that the photo had been removed that it magically reappeared in the publicly available files today, because that's how your Justice Department works. Things just go missing and then they reappear. Now, just let's be entirely clear here. This is about who should get fired from Trump's cabinet. Lutnick has not been accused of any wrongdoing relating to Jeffrey Epstein, and he's denied any impropriety. But you'd think that given all of this, the photo, the business ties, the lies about when their relationship ended, you would think that maybe Congress might have deposed him by now as part of their investigation. And that may still happen. Today, the Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna told Politico, quote, "I believe we have the votes to subpoena him." One would hope that's true, given that Howard Lutnick is a sitting member of the current administration and is therefore directly subject to congressional oversight. It's not optional that members of the administration are subject to congressional oversight. But so far, the Republican-led committee has been much more focused on a president who was last in office 25 years ago, as well as his wife, the former Secretary of State. Today, Republicans finally held their closed-door deposition with former President Bill Clinton. And so far, there have been no major revelations from that interview. We will let you know if anything newsworthy emerges from that hearing. But the real question here is, if Congress can force a former president to sit and answer questions about Epstein, what stops Congress from doing the same thing for a current president and multiple members of his cabinet who have ties to Epstein? If Bill Clinton can be made to testify about Epstein, why not Trump?
Boys stabbed this girl 30 times and are videoing their glee.
Just killed Cassie. You have a call from...
I can turn your wildest ideas into a song. Just describe it in a few words, choose a style, and let Mareka the 5th 8 handle the rest.
Said to Arab neighbours that Iran is using all its defensive and military capabilities under legitimate right of self-defense to protect the integrity of Iran. Well, let's get a little bit more now on what is happening in the air, in particular what's happening with flights, because we've had a lot of information coming into us about airlines cancelling flights, airlines having to tackle closed airspace. BBC Business correspondent Mark Ashdown is in the studio with me. Mark, what are we hearing?
Well, picture the scene last night. British Airways flight BA123 took off on time at 8 o'clock from London Heathrow heading for Doha. Just a couple of hours into that flight, though, the pilots were ordered to turn back. The 200 or so passengers on board found themselves just a couple of hours later back on the tarmac in London. That was one of the first. By 6 a.m. this morning, the flight tracking service, Flight Radar 24, showed there's normally a stream of aircraft crossing over Iranian and Iraqi airspace. That had dried up. Flights were diverted across the much safer Saudi Arabian airspace instead. And we've been speaking to all the major airlines this morning. They say they've diverted or cancelled many flights to the region, citing safety, of course, and apologising to customers. I'll give you a flavour. Virgin Atlantic cancelled its service from London Heathrow to Dubai. Also warned flights to the Maldives, India and Saudi Arabia could have longer flight times because of rerouting. British Airways cancelled flights to Tel Aviv and Bahrain until Wednesday. And today's service to Amman is grounded too. And Wizz Air confirmed it suspended all its flights to and from Israel, Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Amman with immediate effect up until including next Saturday. Flights also to Saudi Arabia cancelled until Tuesday. So major disruption in what is a very congested airspace anyway.
Absolutely, yes. These routes that we're talking about here are extremely busy, and particularly they're busy over a weekend as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, they are following the regulators' advice. The authorities, the European Union Aviation Space Agency, warned all aircraft to avoid crossing that airspace above Iran and Iraq at all altitudes. The UK Civil Aviation Authority also warning passengers who plan to travel to the Middle East to regularly check with their airline before leaving for the airport. And the UK Foreign Office has hour-by-hour advice on visiting any country around the world. Just in the past hour, it's updated that it has added Kuwait to the list of Middle Eastern nations where British citizens have been advised not to travel. That includes Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Oman. The advice to British nationals there is, and I quote, due to reported missile attacks across the region, British nationals should remain vigilant, follow local authority advice and take shelter if advised.
So if one was planning a holiday in any of those places that you have just mentioned, what should one do now? Contact the Foreign Office, go online, look at information? What's your advice?
Well, in the first instance, contact your airline, who you're due to travel with. Stay in regular contact with them. You can get advice from the UK Foreign Office. As I say, that's hour by hour updated. In terms of compensation, if you can't travel, there are very strict rules around that too, but it is a very unusual situation. Ordinarily, if a flight's cancelled, the airline has a duty to put you on the next available flight it can find, even with another airline to get you there. But I guess when the entire region is shut down, that's not possible. So again, the advice there for passengers is you should be entitled to some money back, some compensation potentially. Do contact your airline in the first instance. They should contact you, really, and advise you. There's also advice online, places like Citizens Advice, to get on top of your rights so you can get that compensation.
Mark Ashdown, thank you very much indeed for all of that advice and that update as well. Well, let's just bring you up to date with what we know so far, and that is that earlier this morning, Israel and the United States launched missile strikes on Iran. They say they've targeted military and political targets. They carried out this joint attack on various cities and regions of the country. And since then, Iran has launched a wave of retaliatory strikes against many of its Arab neighbours as well. We can see some live pictures now of Qatar. These are live pictures of Qatar, and you can see in the sky small plumes of smoke where missiles have passed by. The pictures are a little bit shaky, apologies for that, but this is Al-Waqra, which we showed you a little bit earlier. We've had lots of reaction in the last hour or so. As I mentioned, in the UK, that Cobra meeting has just ended, but there's been reaction from other parts of the world as well. In particular, in the last few minutes, we've heard from Hamas in Gaza. It's condemned the US-Israel aggression, as it calls it, against Iran. We've also had reaction from other world leaders, including the EU Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, who has said that the European bloc has adopted extensive sanctions in response to Iran's murderous regime. The Russian Foreign Ministry has described the US and Israel's actions as reckless. And also in the last few minutes, as we've heard, there have been a wave of booms heard in various countries and cities, including Riyadh, Doha and Abu Dhabi, as Iran continues its retaliatory strikes. It says these strikes are a legitimate right of self-defense. That is the statement that Iran has issued to Gulf states. This is a fast-moving, breaking story, and we, of course, will bring you all the very latest here on BBC News. So do stay with us for the headlines at the top of the hour. Live from London, you are watching BBC News.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
The US and Israel launched strikes from air and sea in what they say will be a multi-day operation dubbed by the Pentagon Epic Fury. Smoke can be seen in Tehran with reports of people running in panic. There have been strikes right across the country with reports of deaths in a school. Iran has already been retaliating with attacks on American air bases in Bahrain and other nations. Explosions have been heard in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Jordan, Iraq and UAE. Sirens and explosions across Israel as a state of emergency is declared there. Iranian missiles are intercepted over the country. In a statement, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there's an existential threat against his country. The Foreign Office here and many countries around the world are warning their nationals to shelter in place. Airspace is closed across the Middle East. We'll have the very latest from our correspondents in Washington, Jerusalem and in Doha. Hello, I'm Mariam Mashiri. We continue coverage of this breaking news on BBC News this hour. The United States and Israel are launching airstrikes across Iran. President Trump says the US and Israel have launched major combat operations. Mr. Trump says the objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. He says Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and he accuses the Republic of trying to rebuild its nuclear program. The president has also said there may be American casualties as a result of the operation, dubbed Epic Fury by the Pentagon. The retaliation has started from Iran. Bahrain says the US base there has come under attack. Qatar, Kuwait, Jordan, Iraq and Saudi Arabia have also had missiles fired into their countries. We're getting reports of one person killed in the United Arab Emirates. In a video statement, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the attack is to remove an existential threat to his country. We've been hearing air raid sirens and explosions across Israeli cities. Israel's defense minister has declared a special and permanent state of emergency. He's closed the country's airspace and all schools are shut down. Israeli defense forces say dozens of missiles are being fired into the country. 70,000 reservists have been called up. In Iran, the strikes are across multiple locations. Media reports say blasts have been heard in Esfahan, Karaj, Kermanshah, Qom and the port city of Bushehr. Mehrabad Airport, just outside Tehran, has also come under attack. Well, smoke can be seen coming from buildings in Tehran, and people have reportedly been running away in panic. Iranian media say 24 people have been killed at a school in the south of the country. An official has told the Reuters news agency that Tehran's retaliation and response will be crushing. Israeli officials say Iran's supreme leader Khamenei and Iran's president were both targeted. 7 missiles have hit the presidential palace, and there have been strikes around the supreme leader's compound. The attack follows weeks of tension in the region, with US forces massing around Iran. Well, let's take a moment now to listen to what President Trump's statement was from Mar-a-Lago a short time ago.
We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass.
Well, let's cross live now to John Donaldson in Jerusalem, David Willis in Washington, and Barbara Plett-Usher in Doha. Let's start with you, John, in Jerusalem. And we've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu that in his eyes, this attack is to remove an existential threat to Israel.
Yeah, and that's a message he's been saying for, frankly, years, if not longer. He clearly thinks that Iran is a problem for Israel that needs to be got rid of.